Hello, and welcome to the Finding the Unicorn in You podcast. I'm Dr. Jaime G. Raygoza, a life coach, psychologist, and your host. Join me on a journey to inspire and transform ordinary lives into something special. Here, we celebrate the unicorns, those who choose not to follow the ordinary conventional path, but rather chase after their dreams and choose the path less taken, making them truly unique. Together, we'll explore powerful life coaching techniques and hear from special guests who embody the spirit of unicorns in their own way. What are we waiting for? Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Finding the Unicorn in You. Today, I have a very unique individual who has had 8 heart surgeries, 4 of which were open heart. He nearly died on the operating table 3 times. Despite these limitations, he earned a black belt in jiu-jitsu in 2018. He's here to share his message of resilience, hope, and refusing to give up. I'm very excited to have him on here, so I'll let him share a little bit more about himself and his story. So without further ado, welcome Danny Covey.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. And what a unique story. And wow, you went through something that some of us wouldn't even imagine somebody can actually go through. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how it led to that and the process of you going through that?
Sure. Just to start off, my name is Danny. I'm the husband to one fantabulous wife, the father to 3 amazing kids, and I'm also the survivor of 8 heart surgeries. And so my story really begins before it was really my story. It's the story of my parents. I was born with a congenital heart defect in my aortic valve and my mitral valve. And I started having what my parents called episodes where I would faint when I was very young. And at 11 months old, I had my first kind of exploratory surgery on my heart to determine what was wrong. And a few months after that, I was flown across the country in Canada, where I had emergency surgery at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto, Ontario. I was given a 20% chance to live. And I won't spoil anything, but that was my first open heart surgery and I made it. And so that really was the beginning of what would become a lifelong pattern of surgeries and health issues that I really grew up with and had to overcome. So that first surgery, I was 18 months old. I had a few years where my health was relatively good. At 8 years old, I started going into congestive heart failure. And I was flown again to Sick Kids Hospital and had my second open heart surgery. And that one went fairly well. But the problem was my aortic valve kept narrowing. And every surgery they would do, they would try and open it. And over time, it would narrow and would constrict, cut off blood supply. As a kid, I would faint. I would have episodes where I was dizzy and had chest pain, and that was the normal routine for my life growing up for many years. I had more surgeries at 12 and 13 to try and correct that problem. And then finally, at age 14, I had my third open heart surgery. And that surgery was very different for a couple of reasons. Number one, I almost died at that surgery. And I won't spoil it again, but I made it, which is good. But the second thing that was unique, my aortic valve, they actually removed it and put in an artificial valve. And when that artificial valve was put in my heart and I recovered, suddenly my quality of health drastically improved. And for the first time in my life, I'm able to play sports and start doing things. So that for me was really a turnaround surgery. It was also really cool for another reason. I have mechanical parts in my heart and I tick like a watch. And so as a kid, this was like becoming a bionic person. And I thought it was cool. But that really started off in my childhood, what was a series of surgeries.
Wow. And I can only imagine what the thoughts that went through your head as you were a child and being so young and having a certain limitation to what you can and cannot do, and then going in and out of the hospital. That could be pretty traumatic, I think, for your mental health, not only like your physical strain from all the surgeries, but also your mental psyche as you're growing up. How was that for you?
It's That's a very interesting question, because if you had asked me as a child, I would have said, this is normal. It's only after reflecting back as an adult, looking back, that I was able to identify I was actually going through a lot of mental health stress and challenges. I'm bald now, but at 8 years old, I started losing my hair in clumps because it was stress associated with surgery. But at the time, it was all that I really knew. So it seemed normal. And now being away from it and looking back, you realize, hold on, being in and out of hospital and never participating in sports, having chest pain, having to have all these uh, special situations set up, that's not normal.
And that makes sense, especially when you're a child. If that's the only lifestyle you're used to, then it's not something that you're gonna see as different or odd unless your peers were telling you something from that. But what I have so many questions. I don't even know which one to ask you.
Fire away.
But it's just the mental endurance that you've grown over the years to be able to go through all of these different surgeries and things that work and didn't work. And like you said, you had that one miracle surgery that allowed you to now do sports and things. How was that transition for you from having a certain limitation to now the veil is out and now I can do more things?
As a kid, I couldn't do a lot of physical things, but my escape was always drawing. I love to draw. As an adult, now I work in marketing and graphic design. And so I'm still being creative. As a child, that outlet was creativity and doing things. So I couldn't be physical, but my mind could be everywhere. Growing up, once I hit 13 or 14 and I'm starting to do things, I had this huge interest in martial arts, but I couldn't do it. I would watch Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee from a hospital bed and look at them in awe. Now in my teens, I can take baby steps towards trying to do that. So I don't know why I zeroed in on martial arts, but I said, that's what I want to do. My parents were absolutely terrified. I was exhilarated, but the limitation was, look, you can do this, but you can't do tournaments. And so I didn't. And so for me, I'd say my 14-year-old self had this awakening into pushing my limits, testing my boundaries, and just seeing where they were. Growing as an adult, that was great until I hit my mid-30s. And in my mid to late 30s, I started doing martial arts again. And I'm looking at this goal of getting a black belt. But I notice as I'm training, my breathing is labored. It's getting very difficult. And through very bizarre circumstances, I had some testing done and I'd seen my cardiologist, and my aortic arch had actually enlarged. And so I was told, stop everything. You're going to need surgery again. And so as a 40-year-old man going back into surgery, which I haven't had since I was 14, it was strange, but very familiar territory. And heart surgery, up until just a few short years ago, was something that I had a lot as a kid. Now I'm back there. And this last surgery that I had in 2017, Dr. Jamie, I should not be here talking to you, because the surgery, I was supposed to have my aortic arch repaired. When they opened me up, it had burst. I'd had an aortic aneurysm. And when that happens, it's an emergency situation. People generally don't come back from that. I know the term miracle gets thrown around a lot and very loosely. My surgeons were being called miracle workers because I'm still here. So that last surgery when I was 40 repaired my valve, repaired everything. My health has been very good since then, but I do have limitations, and I'm very conscious to push up against those limitations, but never past.
And how was that when you woke up and they told you what happened? How was your initial reaction to the whole, the event?
I don't know if this is sad or if it's good planning on my part. But after every surgery, there's generally two questions I ask. Even since a kid, I'll say, "What day is it? And how did it go?" And the how did it go was difficult because I was told, and then I fell back to sleep for a day. And then I woke up and I had to be told again. It didn't really hit me, the severity of what had happened, until a few days after surgery. And I was laying in my hospital bed, realizing everything that happened or could have happened. And that's when it really sunk in.
And do you feel like you have a different outtake of life since that? Or do you feel like you have the same type of still ambition, still wanting to do everything the same way?
Definitely when you brush up against I wouldn't call it a near death experience, but when you brush up against nearly dying multiple times, it absolutely does change your perspective. When I was 14, I had that mechanical valve put in. It literally ticks. And every time I hear that tick and I pay attention to it, I feel like it's the word gift. Every day that I've had that valve that I've lived is a gift. That last surgery I had at age 40, that was a few years ago now, since 2017. Every day is a gift. We take nothing for granted because you're not guaranteed. And that's the thing that I've really come to terms with. We have this idea that we're all going to live to be 80 or 90 and pass away peacefully in our sleep. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. And so some people, it's very difficult and sad, they will pass away from cancer, or it'll be a heart attack, or it'll be a car fatality. And we just don't know. So how should that affect how we live? Be grateful because we have today, we have this moment. We're not guaranteed much beyond that.
That's powerful. And I think a lot of us do tend to take today for granted. We stress about the very minuscule things, like the really minor things that we shouldn't be stressed out about, that are out of our control. And we forget to really embrace enjoying being alive today, having the privilege of doing certain things that we have. And it's a good reminder for us to be grateful for what we have. And like you said, your life can instantly end tonight, tomorrow, and everything that you thought was big and important is now compared to nothing because it's done.
Yeah. And how it's changed me over the years too. I love joking around. And in the past, I loved being the center of attention. Now I'm just very happy to sit back and watch. I don't need to be the center of attention. With my creative work, I love creating a center of attention and drawing attention to that. But I'm happy just to really sit back and watch and look and just appreciate things. Some of my happiest moments, even with my family, is just to sit back and watch them laughing and smiling. It's not some crazy trip to Disneyland. It's just the gelling and bonding that we have together. It's those quiet non-moments, as I call them.
Yeah, and that's really special. Just really enjoying the little smiles that you get from hearing other kids laugh or like your family members just enjoying each other and just really enjoying the moment. It's easy for us to not, like I said, just get involved in the everyday life that you forget about. I'll give you a perfect example for me. I live alone with my cat and my dog. And sometimes I take them so much for granted that they're there. But just like the fact that they come and greet me every time I come home and that they like I sit down and they both get on my lap and then they show me their love and affection that way. And sometimes I may be irritated because it was a rough day or just I'm in my head and I'm like, just get off me. But they're showing me their love and affection because they've been isolated the whole day because I was at work. And I need to be more grateful that I have pets that are willing to do that. Or when my mom calls or my sister calls, be grateful that they're calling because they're thinking of me. I have loved ones. I think all those little things that we take for granted, it's so much bigger when you actually take it apart piece by piece and you're like, wow, I am truly blessed for all these little things that I'm allowed to have and that I have in my life.
Yeah, you've absolutely. And I don't say this as though I've got it all together. I get frustrated and annoyed sometimes, but I find for me, I'm rushing and I've got all these expectations. And when I slow down and just accept whatever's happening, then I can find joy. Then I can find a degree of peace in what's happening, even though it's not all good.
That makes sense. Now, if we have listeners that are going through something in their life that they feel like it's a big struggle, and it could be physical, it can be health wise, it can be mental, whatever it may be. What are some pieces of advice that you've learned over the years that you can probably give them as advice for them to get through whatever they're going through?
I would say for me, there's been two huge mindsets that have been very helpful for me. Number one is absolutely refuse to see yourself as a victim. All of us have been victimized. We've had bad things happen, unfair hands that have been dealt to us, and we have every right to complain. But choosing to see yourself through that lens helps nothing. It does not, it's not productive. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't get you anywhere. And even though I can look at it and say, look, my health has been poor growing up, I don't know if I'll live to be a ripe old age. It's not helpful. It's not going to help me be a better father. It's not going to help me be a better husband. But I think the single biggest thing that has helped me is not to ask the question that we all ask. And that is, why me? Why did this happen? Why was I born with this condition? Why have I had so many surgeries? Or for other people, why did I lose my father? Why did I have this car crash? Why did I lose my job? We ask that, but we will absolutely never get a satisfactory answer as to why things happen. Never. I think the better question, and I can honestly say this since I was a kid, I've asked this, what is there to learn? What can this situation teach me? Going through heart surgery at 8 years old, I don't know why that happened, but I can name 5 things that it helped me in my life. And so even this last surgery that I went through, what am I being taught here? What's the lesson? Tell you one thing, I've learned a lot about the value of family and friends, taking your health not for granted, but just enjoying the small moments. And that is my single biggest piece of advice that I have to take for myself. But if I could give to anyone, is what is my current situation teaching me? Because there's so many lessons to be drawn from what we go through, way better than why did this happen?
Yeah, I think that's a really important lesson to learn. And it's something that I see very common in people, that we self-victimize ourselves. We find that self-pity and we marry ourselves with that negativity. And that's, instead of finding solutions, we find reasons to justify more and more why our life is miserable or not the way it's supposed to. And I think a lot of it has to do with comparing ourselves with people around us and seeing that perfect picture social media of other people and how they present themselves on social media.
Yeah.
And how do you get yourself out of that? Did you ever experience a moment in your life where you've victimized yourself for a bit? And if so, how did you get yourself out of that?
Oh, all the time. All the time. I'm not sitting here saying I got my act together. These are things that I've learned over time. My last surgery, about a week after surgery, part of my cardiac rehabilitation was to go walking every day. And so there's one day I'm literally shuffling along. I'm hunched over. I'm in pain. Right on cue, the rain starts. And in my head, I'm thinking that black belt that I was training for before I had surgery, I'm never going to get back the quality of health that I had to get back to train. And so, yeah, I was feeling sorry for myself, but I kept walking. And sometimes you will ask the why me, and life is very difficult, but there are things that you can do. And for me that night, man, I can't fight. I can't spar. I can't kick. I can't punch. I can shuffle for 10 minutes. And that was literally all I did that day. That was a win. Some days, maybe I stretch, maybe just stretching my body and feeling again, that's the win. So it has to be just tiny little improvements. And if I do 1% of what I can do each day, that turns into 2% and that compounds over time. And then suddenly I'm back to where I was and then some, because you're putting in those tiny little efforts.
I love that. And I think a lot of us tend to forget about big, the small wins because we want the big wins. We want the instant gratification, and not just my own experience that nothing that I went something of that severe, but I'm just thinking like right now I'm training for a marathon. So I sometimes get flustered when I'm like, I can't run X amount of miles. Like I keep heaving and I just can't do it. How am I supposed to run 26 miles when I can barely get through 5? And
Mhm.
I get flustered sometimes because I was like, what's the point? I don't see the thing. But then I sit down and think about 3 months ago, I wasn't even able to run a mile. And the fact that I'm
Wow.
running 5 miles now is a big accomplishment. So just because I'm not at the pace that I want to be doesn't mean I'm not progressing.
Absolutely. And actually, a shout out to a friend of mine who does marathon running. He gave me some advice, and I've taken it when I run. He said, smile when you run, because I don't know the psychology behind it, but he explained it actually helps him. So I've tried it. I'm on the fence whether it works, but I'm still smiling when it hurts.
But I think it does. In a sense, you have to be able to smell when you do any activity because going in with a positive attitude, your brain can distinguish if you're smiling is fake or not. And it's
Right.
the same thing with laughter. If you laugh, you'll still get the same benefits if you're faking it or not. So might as well trick your mind that you are having a good experience.
Yep.
And the last thing you're going to remember is, wow, I'm so proud of myself for finishing this. And it was such a great time. Versus if you're in your mind, I hate this, I don't want to be here. Then you're going to remember that.
David, I don't know if you're familiar with David Goggins. He's
Mm.
got a very colorful book. He talks about the idea of embracing the suck. And he said, when your lungs are burning and let's say you're running and your thighs are on fire and everything's cramping, he's don't try and run through it. Don't try and escape it. He's just feel it and wallow in it and just embrace the fact my body's under stress and it sucks and it hurts, but keep going. And there's been times that I've actually found that helpful rather than trying to escape it. Just revel in that pain, feel it, fully
Mhm.
let it wash over you. And it ceases to be an enemy and part of the experience of what you're enduring.
No, that's true. And then just note that this is just the suck is temporary. It's
Hmm.
not going to be forever. And it's just to get to the next milestone that you want to get into. And it's just part of life. You need to understand that in order for you to achieve a goal, there's going to be some suck in it, and it's part of growth. And if it was easy, then everybody would be doing it. These are goals for a reason. So whatever you want to do, get a black belt, run a marathon, accomplish whatever feat you want to do, there's going to be some suck in it because it's a new habit that our body's not used to, and it's a new routine that we're trying to get adapt to.
Yeah. And you've actually brought up a really good point that I want to dwell on is part of what's helped me go through all these things. To assume that there's a lesson in difficulty means that there is purpose in the difficulty. So you're not running just to be out of breath. There's a goal in mind. There's a reason. If you keep running, it's going to strengthen your lungs, it's going to strengthen your body. When I was training for a black belt, it wasn't just to put my body through pain for no reason. There's a goal in mind. And in willingly enduring that difficulty has a reason. It's doing something. And I think that's really, it's again, it's a hard thing to learn to say, look, whatever I'm facing, there's a reason for it. If I endure it, it's going to lead to something.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there's actually scientific studies that show that the more you visualize your future self doing and accomplishing the goal that you've done, the more successful you're going to have. And you're going to do habits that are actually going to benefit your future self. Because if you can't imagine yourself actually doing the task or doing the thing, and I'm just going to go back to my goal, running a marathon, if I can't picture myself actually running a marathon and what that's going to look like, how I'm going to feel,
Mhm.
then I'm not going to be inspired and motivated to actually work towards it. Because, like you said, then I'm just doing it because I'm out of breath, because I want to feel the pain. But it's like big picture. I'm doing this because I want to get to that level. One thing that I do when I run is I always look around me and see if there's anybody else that I see training for something. And
Mhm.
occasionally I'll find a runner that I see them like going at a steady pace. They're like, but in their zone. And I'm like, that's what I want to look like. That's what I want to feel. That's future me. That's going to be me in a few months. I'm going to be like that person just striding and running. And I'm not seeing when they stop and take a breath when they're heaving, but I'm just seeing that little picture moment. And that's what I want to strive to be one day, just being able to keep that pace, keep that stride, and call myself a runner. And I think that's what people have to do is think about what their goal is. What is the long picture? How would they look? How are they going to feel? What are the things that are going to be the future them, and then try to aspire to be that, and notice that your behavior, your patterns, and your motivation is going to change with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to see it and then you do it.
Yes. And you did mention about an author recently, and you said, I think they Bryce the Suck. I know you also wrote a book. So I do want to talk a little bit about that. What inspired you to write a book? Because I actually learned the statistic the other day. Only 3% of the population actually have written a book.
Wow.
Congrats on that. You're part of the 3%. What inspired you to write the book, and what is it about?
It actually started very sadly. A friend of mine, he and his wife lost a child, and it was a stillborn. And he was wrestling through his grief. And he said, I want to write a children's book. He's an artist. And he said, can we go for a walk? And I just want to pitch some ideas to you and bounce some ideas. So we went for a very long walk through the forest. And he was just giving me different ideas, and I was offering some feedback. And at the end of the walk, he turned to me and he said, have you ever thought about writing a book? And this was in the fall of 2020. And I looked at him and I said, no, I'm too young. And I had this idea, what do I have to say? And that's something that old people do when they're reflecting back on their life. But that idea really stuck with me. And over the years, I really didn't understand what I've gone through is unique. I just accepted it. It was normal for me, but I'd always had different ideas bouncing around in my head. So that question that he asked me stuck with me. And I thought, okay, so I went home and sat down and I said, let me make some notes. If I was to write a book, let me just make a few notes. And after a few hours, I had 12 pages of notes of things that I could talk about. Two things happened. I got really excited. Wow, this is amazing. Maybe I've got something to say. And then split second after that, I was terrified. I can't write a book. I don't know what I'm doing. It's a huge process. Where do I begin? And generally in my life, if something scares me, that's a cue, do it. If it's pulling me out of my comfort zone, or I don't want to speak at an engagement, or I don't want to bungee jump, it's a challenge. Are you going to stay where you are, or are you going to grow? And that idea of you should write a book, that scared me. And then as soon as it scared me, I thought, oh, great, now I have to. And so I spent about 4 months just planning out how I would write, what I wanted to talk about. And I felt really challenged to share my story. And for me, I haven't really talked about it much, but the struggle I've had throughout my life is one of survivor's guilt, where I've almost died 3 times. I've had 8 surgeries, and I'm still here. There's many people that I know that I've gone to their hospital room. I've talked with them. We've shared. They're not here. They've had heart surgery. They've passed away from cancer or something else. And I thought, why am I still here? And so in my book, I will never get a satisfactory answer because I'm asking why. But I wanted to wrestle through the different components of, can I come to some kind of a peace or some kind of a settlement as to how to cope with survivor's guilt? And so I didn't want it just to be a collection of this happened when I was 6 and this happened when I was 7. There's an overarching theme about struggle. And that's really what I wanted to capture. It also tells my story about having these surgeries and then somehow, years later, earning a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And the title of my book is Scar Tissue. And I was playing around with a bunch of different titles, but I knew I had my title when I read this fact. And let me see if I can remember it. Because skin cells is made up, because scar tissue is made up of fiber and not skin cells, it's stronger than ordinary skin. And unlike skin, it doesn't have hair or sweat glands or blood vessels. When I realized that, I had my title, because scar tissue, even though it looks ugly, it's stronger than ordinary skin. And in my book, scar tissue isn't just physical scar tissue, it's a concept. It's the idea that I have this attitude that says, I'm a victor, not a victim. I've been through these horrible things. I've had these wounds. They're going to heal. They're going to be stronger. And so that's really what I tried to focus on in my book is, yes, we will all go through trauma. We all have wounds. If we pick at them, if we don't allow them to heal, it'll be an open wound for the rest of our life. If we nurture it, if we rehabilitate and we allow it to heal, we're stronger. And that's really what I wanted to convey through my book.
I love that. And I didn't know that about scar tissue. So that's interesting. So even though something that aesthetically we don't see pleasing is something that is actually going to benefit us and in the long run and help us actually survive and get better. And it's a constant reminder, I think, of the journey that you went through. And even though some of
Yeah.
the scars that we can't see mentally, they're still there. And I think these memories are something that we should, like I said, wow, this is something that's going to make me stronger in the long run than weak.
Yeah. And it's funny, when I was training, I had somebody accidentally kick me in the chest and they froze. And I thought, what's going to happen? And I said, I'm going to kick you back harder because it's healed. It's strong. There's no risk of things breaking apart or falling off or anything like that. And that I realized scar tissue really applies to every area of life. You're doing this marathon, you're stretching yourself. Man, you're going to be tough by the time this is done. You're going to have a different mindset because you're going to look and say, this thing took a long time. You're going to look back on it and say, I can do this. What else could I do? Now your comfort zone is bigger. And that I love that.
Yeah. And that's the reason I decided to do it. It's because I wanted to push my mental endurance and really show myself that I can do physical things in my head. I've had this narrative in my head ever since I was young that I was weak when it comes to like physical activities because I sucked at sports. I was never that kid. I'm a video game nerd. I'm the one that was stuck behind playing the PlayStation and the Nintendo when all my other cousins were out there playing soccer and volleyball and whatever. I had that narrative stuck in my head that I'm just not good at physical endurance. So I wanted to prove myself wrong. And just because it's hard doesn't mean I can't do it. I always have this quote from Alice in Wonderland and I'm probably going to butcher it up, but it's always the most amazing people are the ones that do at least one thing that they fear every day.
Yep.
So you have to do things that are scary. You have to do things that people think are impossible. And just because it's impossible for them doesn't mean it's going to be impossible for you. Embrace the fear, embrace the suck, and just go with it.
Yeah. And I look at now, like I got a black belt in 2018 and now I don't even think about it. It's just normal. It's part of life now, where that for years was a goal. Even as a kid, looking at that saying, wow, imagine if I could do that one day. And now it's routine. And I think that's where even for me, just reflecting, hey, dude, think you've got this. Be grateful because there were times 20 years ago you couldn't have done that. And I think just part of that gratitude just comes from the reflecting and just slowing down, taking the time to think through things.
No, yeah. And you said it's part of your routine now. What used to be maybe impossible or something that was going to be a difficulty, now it's just part of you. So it's amazing. Now, this has been such a fantastic conversation, but we are at the point where I'm going to ask you the last question, which is the premise of the podcast. Excuse me. We're in the process here of making people unicorns, which is essentially just allowing people to embrace being unique, being different. What the norm is living life very passively, letting external factors just take over, and you're kind of cruising through life. Unicorns are people that want to go against the grain and do something that will bring them passion, bring them joy, and actually feel like they have a purpose in life. So what are some things based on the lessons that you've learned through your journey that people can do to embrace that uniqueness and be that unicorn?
To be that unicorn, assume that life is going to be hard and assume that there's a reason it's hard and look for what those hard things are teaching you. If I'm a unicorn and I'm looking for why did this bad, we've talked about it. You have to assume there's a reason. You have to assume you'll get through it. And you'll have to assume you will come out absolutely stronger through it. And in the middle of all that, while things are difficult, don't quit. Keep going. Don't quit.
Just because it's hard doesn't mean you have to stop.
Exactly. Keep shuffling for 5 more minutes. Keep training. Keep running. keep going because your comfort zone is growing. And I will say this, and this does tie into your question. I was really impacted by a quote. And this quote, when I came across it, really solidified I have to write. And if you're going to be an amazing unicorn, it's going to inspire others. And the quote is this: one day you will tell your story of how you've overcome what you're going through now, and it will become part of someone else's survival guide. When I read that, I thought, man, I have to write. I have to do the difficult, hard things, because if I become that magical unicorn that reaches its potential, who can I inspire and who can they inspire? And on it goes. And that's how it should be.
I completely love that. And it is so true. You don't know the people that you're inspiring every day. What you may think is hard for you, or let me rephrase that. What you may think is a small feat for you, you're like, that's nothing. It's a humongous step for somebody else. And you just don't know how you change a person's life just by putting yourself out there and choosing to be that unique version of you, to be that person, just being your authentic self.
Yeah, 100%.
I completely love this conversation. Thank you so much for being on here once again. And Danny, if listeners want to reach out to you, they want to buy your book, or they just have questions, how can they do so?
I'm very easy to find online. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. I have a website. You can sign up for my newsletter there. My website is simply DannyCovey.com. That's DANNYCOVEY.com. My book can be ordered there. It's also available on Amazon as well.
Awesome. Perfect. And for listeners, if you want to make it easy for yourself, you can go to my website at Raygoza-consulting.com, go to the Unicorn Wall of Fame, and you'll actually see Danny along with the other unicorns in there. You'll see his bio, a summary of this episode, and all the links in there. You could also scroll down on the episode and you'll see it in the show notes as well. But finally, a reminder for everyone, don't forget, episodes come out every Friday at 7 a.m. And don't forget to leave us that 5-star review. Thank you so much, Danny. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for sharing your story and continuing to inspire others around us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. And until next time. Thank you for listening to the Finding the Unicorn in You podcast. I truly appreciate you listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and gained valuable insights. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review on your favorite platform. Keep listening, keep learning, and keep growing. Until next time, this is Dr. Jaime G. Raygoza signing off.